You're listening to Change Your POV Podcast, episode 150. Are you trying to teach him a lesson so he won't do whatever that is again? Or are you trying to punish him? I realized at that moment that what I was doing was more punishment than it was teaching a lesson. But Sergeant Major stopped me. He goes, "Don't answer. I don't want you to answer that." He goes, "But is there something else that you can do that would actually force him to learn the lesson as opposed to it just being a punishment?" Change Your POV Podcast is dedicated to helping veterans become just as successful out of uniform as they were when they were in. Many that served finished their military career as a non-commissioned officer, like myself, and I found it very difficult at times to transition that experience as an NCO into the civilian sector. A lot of things transferred, but yet a lot of things didn't. I made a lot of mistakes as an NCO, and I made even more mistakes in the civilian world. Leading people is never easy, whether it's in the military or in combat or out in the civilian world. There are a few things that still remain true, and that is people are people. People have feelings. And although sometimes it's easier to lock somebody up at parade rest to get your point across, it's not always the right thing to do. You may experience a time in your life as a supervisor or a manager where you will, again, be in charge of or be leading people. This episode, Bennett and I sit down and we talk about accountability and what that means to hold our employees accountable, whether you're a manager, a supervisor, or a team lead, or perhaps you just have people that look up to you for guidance and direction. This episode will help you understand what that means to hold employees accountable. I hope you learned something. All right, folks, welcome to Change Your POV Podcast. I am your host, Eddie Lazary.
And I'm Bennett Hanton.
And we are talking about accountability. A couple weeks ago, episode 146, we kicked off the topic of conversation in an episode called How to Be More Personally Accountable. So if you've not already done so, I highly encourage you to go back to episode 146 and check that out. And you can find that at changeyourpov.com/episode 146. This week, we're talking about how to hold your employees accountable. So it's a different take or different aspect of accountability. Accountability is still accountability, but personal accountability and holding others accountable a little bit different. And so we wanted to break that up accordingly into those two different aspects of accountability. But before we get any further into this discussion, I would like to thank this week's sponsor, Mountain Up. Bennett, can you talk to us about Mountain Up?
So Mountain Up is a apparel company, military veteran / apparel company that basically is run by a guy who he started his Army career in the 10th Mountain and has this great affinity for the 10th Mountain and decided to name his freaking company after it.
Yeah, man.
And so they make t-shirts, they have contracts with all kinds of other outfitter type stuff where you can buy so much stuff there, whether it's military surplus or really cool t-shirts and apparel to man cave type things with like either carvings of like a Marine Corps emblem or carvings of like the regiment that you were in the Army, or like first Cav guy, you can get a first Cav carving on the wall, or the metal signs even. So there's kind of sky's the limit, but what they're really known for, and personally still to this day, it's the best product that they offer, is their freaking hats. Mm-hmm. Their hats are out of the box, the most comfortable freaking hat I've ever put on my head. There's no, like sometimes you need like a break-in period.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's false. Not with this freaking hat. I mean, the little touches, like it doesn't have the, what do you call that thing that's on the top?
The little button.
Like the little button.
Yeah.
Like the little button thing on the top. But sometimes like, it can either, especially once you start losing your hair or you're bald or whatever, that sumbitch gets annoying, or if someone wants to walk up and pop you on top of the head. It hurts, right?
Yeah.
It's just annoying. Well, they don't have those on their hats. It's just those little touches like that.
Yep.
And they've got an assortment, pretty much patches or brim clips that you want for these set hats.
Yeah, because it's got a Velcro hook and loop system patch on the front.
Yeah,
so
on the front and on the back.
And
so
on the back. Yeah.
There's a spot where you can put like a name tape or something
right
on the back. Or, if you want it to say fuck you on it, it could say fuck you. I'm just saying, sky's the limit.
Yeah,
right?
I like it so you can buy multiple patches and you can actually, like, if I wanted to wear a hat one day that just had the American flag on the front, then that's that's the patch I put on. If I want, Texas flag patch on my hat, I could do that. Or Texas flag is awesome. New Hampshire flag, not so much.
Not so much. But New Hampshire has the best slogan, motto.
Yeah, they have that tread on me patch. Yeah. Oh, the slogan, live free or die. Yes.
Yeah, but
right.
Unfortunately, New Hampshire's not living up to that.
Right.
In a lot of aspects.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, folks.
Unless you get north of the White Mountains, then it's like the Wild West up there. But anyway.
Yeah. They don't even know that's the slogan. They just live it every day.
They just live it every day up there, boy.
Right.
Jeez.
They're like, slogan? What's a slogan?
What the fuck's a slogan? What's a motto?
So
I just like to kill moose and eat them.
Yeah, man.
That's what they do.
So when I moved up here, I didn't know this. Did you know that the toothbrush was invented in Maine?
I did not.
I didn't either. Do you know why?
I should know that, but I don't.
Yep. So it was the toothbrush was invented in Maine because if it were invented anywhere else, it would have been called the teeth brush.
You're so funny. It's fantastic. The teeth brush.
Yeah.
Downeasters. We're Downeasters.
I'm sorry. That was a very inappropriate joke.
Yeah.
A little slam on Mainers. So I'm sorry.
Mainers.
Folks. Yeah. Anyway, it's all in good fun.
Lord.
Well, at least I'm not a masshole. You know what I mean?
I do.
There you go, Andrew. That one's for you.
Andrew, have fun with that.
Yes.
Asshole.
So anyway, Mountain Up. So folks, if you want to check out more about Mountain Up, I got a surprise for you, a little gift from us to you. You can head on over to changeyourpov.com/Mountain Up. And when you're there, go and load up your shopping cart full of all kinds of great and wonderful things for you and or your loved ones. And then at checkout, enter the promo code GOOD10, GOOD, that's Golf, Oscar, Delta, 10 for your 10% off coupon code. All right, man. Let's do this. Accountability. It's a big word with with an even bigger meaning, right?
It's really, we're throwing it hardcore in the military.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So if you want, in episode 146, we actually covered the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of accountability. So we're not going to repeat that. If you want to know what that is, you can either look it up yourself, hit the Google machine, or go back and listen to the episode. You can listen to what accountability is. But this week, we're going to talk about specifically accountability as it pertains to our workers, people that work for us. And maybe, there's a difference between dotted line and solid line reports, right? And so just make sure everybody's clear on this. A dotted line, a solid line direct, that's somebody that works directly for you, right? You are the supervisor and or manager. They work for you, all right? You are a department manager, or maybe you work at Walmart and you're the department store manager. They report directly to you. You influence their mid-year review, their end-of-year review. You have a say in their compensation, their bonuses, merit increases, things like that, right? So that's the solid line. Now, there are also what's called dotted line directs. Dotted line directs is maybe I'm a supervisor, and maybe, so in the military, we did this a lot, right? So to bring it into military terms, let's say all of a sudden my platoon sergeant comes down and tells me, he tells me that I'm going to go be the NCOIC at railhead duty over on the railhead at Fort Hood, right? Which has happened many times. So I go, and I am now the NCOIC of the railhead operations over at the railhead on Fort Hood, Texas, loading out our brigade's worth of vehicles to go to NTC, the National Training Center, for example. Now, while I'm there, I'm the NCYC, so I have probably my own guys. I'm the senior squad leader, so maybe I have my guys. Obviously, if I'm going to go do a detail like that, I'm going to bring my guys with me on this fun. And so they're going to be there with me, and they are my solid line direct reports. I sign their counseling statements. I recommend them for promotion, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going to get a whole crew of guys from other battalions, other units, other platoon, you know what I'm saying? But all those other guys are going to report to me while they're on this detail. So those guys...
Probably the shitbags.
Yeah, probably. But those guys are going to be what's considered to be dotted line reports. They are working for me on a temporary basis. They have their own team chief. They have their own platoon sergeant. They have their own platoon leader. But while they're working on this detail, they are working for me. Okay, so that's a dotted line. That's the difference between dotted line and solid line. Now that's a good way to describe it, because when you get out of the military and you move into the civilian sector, you're going to experience something very similar to that when you're working in corporate. You're going to have people that work directly for you, but you may get put on a team where there are other people from other departments that are going to work on a project that you're going to lead. And those people are going to have their own managers and or own supervisors. But while they're working on this project for you, they are basically reporting to you. You're going to give them their daily workload. You're going to give them feedback. You're going to let them know. You're going to hold them accountable to deliverables, those kinds of things.
The dotted line, solid line. Think of a organizational chart,
right,
that shows the CEO at the top and your little ass on the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to clarify that for people, that every organization has an organizational chart.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a family tree.
Right.
And that's what we mean by solid line, dotted line. Okay.
And
I just want to clarify that, because some people will be like, what the fuck are they talking about?
Yeah, because that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because on the organizational chart, the lines that connect that echelon, those tiers of responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah, the lines that connect the boxes, some will be dotted and some will be solid. And
right.
that's where the term comes from. Yes.
Yep. Correct.
Oh, thank you for that. So what I did was to kind of help this conversation along. I don't know, are you familiar? I know you're familiar with it, Ben. I don't know how much you read these, but the Harvard Business Reviews articles?
Yeah, from time to time.
Yeah, so me too. I'm not a hardcore Harvard Business Review person, but I was initially introduced to the Harvard Business Review articles when I was in college, because we were forced to read a lot of them as case studies, etc., and write papers about them. So I came to appreciate a lot of the content. Now, a lot of those articles are highly biased one way or the other. They're supposed to. Some of the best ones are articles that actually kind of tell both sides of the spectrum.
Yes. They're more objective.
Right. So this one I read it through, and it's incredible. And I'll put the link to it in the show notes for this episode. And it's "Do You Understand What Accountability Really Means?" And it's authored by Jonathan Raymond. And the publication date is October 13th, 2016. And I just wanted to properly cite that because I am going to read some of this stuff here verbatim, and I wanted to make sure that Mr. Raymond got full credit for this in the Harvard Business Review. But he says, every leader now this is Raymond here, right? Every leader I've ever met sees accountability as a foundational ingredient in a healthy and sustainable culture, which I totally agree. The problem is, as often as the case with leadership and management ideas, we use the word without really understanding what it means. Usually, we make the mistake of holding one to one or both of these hidden beliefs. And here they are. Number one, we have a deeply, now here's this is one of the beliefs that it's just unfounded, right? We have a deeply held association between accountability and punishment, instead of considering it a tool to help people unlock their highest self. And number two, we have a deeply held assumption that accountability is a one-off event rather than thinking of it as a long-term personal conversation between manager and employee, okay? And so I think this is incredibly relevant in this conversation.
2 days ago, without any prompting from you, I read that exact same post.
Did you?
On the Harvard Business Review.
Yeah, man.
Kind of funny.
Yeah. And so I want to kind of go through this a little bit here, right? I don't want to read the entire article. You can do that on your own. But what it talks about here, now I really wanted to kind of talk about those two briefly, right? The deep association between accountability and punishment. So a lot of people think to hold people accountable is a punishment, right? Like, give me an example of a time you experienced this in the workplace, either yourself and or a coworker that you've heard of.
Okay, so let's see. Accountability as a punishment.
Now, we did it in the military all the time, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. As a fire team, let's say, you don't get everything done that you're supposed to get done. Then it's that mass punishment type thing,
right? Yeah.
So everyone's accountable for the actions of the group.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. So it's like, when you tell Joe to go and do a TA50 layout, and you tell him you're going to be there in an hour to inspect, and you get there and he's only got half of his shit laid out, or he's missing a ton of stuff. So now we as NCOs, we are deeply inclined to hold Joe accountable. And in doing so, we administer corrective action.
Punishment.
Corrective action, right? Punishment, right?
Front-leaning arrest, boy.
Exactly, right? And so it's very easy for guys in the military to associate this idea of accountability and punishment.
With punishment.
Right, correct. When in fact, what this Harvard Business Review, and folks, by the way, I too had a strong correlation between accountability and punishment when I was in the military.
And probably still do.
And to some degree. It doesn't
just go away.
Right. Yeah. And I struggled with it in corporate. And then once I didn't change my opinion because I read this article. I've kind of through experience changed my opinion. And then I read this article and it just reinforced.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. Yeah. So instead, considering it a tool, the tool that they're referring to here is accountability, referring accountability as a tool to help people unlock their highest self. And so what does that mean? How is that different than punishment? It's when Joe screws up, right? When Joe doesn't lay out his TA50, right?
Right.
Can I tell a story real quick?
Of course you can.
Okay, all right. So there was, this is true story. I've told this once before, but not on this podcast. I think I told it on another show that I was interviewed on. So there I was a young buck. I had just gotten home or back to the States from Korea in 2001-ish, I think. And so I don't know who Joe was. I don't even know what he did. But it was after COB formation, everybody was starting to leave. I had pulled Joe aside. Now, it was kind of warm and toasty. Those that have ever been to Texas know it can get pretty toasty down there. So I did the right thing by having Joe kind of go over into the grass underneath a tree into some shade. And I commenced to smoking his ass, right? Push-ups. Push-ups for days. It was one of those, you do push-ups until I get tired kind of things. And he was just down there just knocking them out, right? And knocking them out. And I mean, I looking back on it now, I'm like, damn, that was a little excessive, right? I was fucking this kid up, and I don't even. It must not have been that big of a deal because I don't even remember what he did. So it definitely didn't. The crime didn't fit the punishment, but he had done something that I felt he needed to be held accountable for, and I used punishment in form of push-ups in order to drive this accountability piece. Yeah. And you're muffled again, by the way. And so I'll keep talking while you figure that out.
Go ahead.
And so next thing you know, I hear from a little ways across the parking lot, right? I mean, it wasn't really far away, but it was far enough away where he kind of had to raise his voice to get my attention. All I hear is, "Hey, Sergeant!" I look over, and I see a guy I've never I didn't recognize him. I didn't know who he was. But you can tell, like, at a distance when you're looking at somebody's collar. That's the first thing you do. You look at the collar to kind of see what you're up against. You know what I mean? And I saw a whole lot of shit going north and a whole lot of shit going south with very little daylight in the middle.
Right.
which
And you're like, some bitch.
yeah. So, it was definitely a sergeant major of some sort. And
or something like that.
yeah, yeah. And usually you can kind of see a little bit of daylight from like if it were a first sergeant. I saw no daylight. It was straight 3 rockers, 3 chevrons, and a whole lot of black in the middle. So this guy was definitely. I'm a buck sergeant, so I guess it didn't really matter how much light there was in the middle. I was fucked, right? So he says, he yells at me, "Get over here!" And Joe, all right. So in Joe's mind, he's thinking to himself, he's like, "Oh yeah, this sergeant's about to get fucked up because what he's doing to me is so wrong, right? A little excessive." Which Joe was right. It was. But Sergeant Major, like Joe starts to get up, and Sergeant Major's like, "What are you doing? Get your ass back down!" And so Joe's like, "Oh fuck," right? And so Joe gets back down. I go over there, and I'm like, "Oh man!" Like I already know. I mean, I know I fucked up because I already know what he's gonna say, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
And I go over there. I lock up, parade rest. Yes, Sergeant Major. I don't know the guy. I don't know where he came from. I don't recognize him. But then again, I'm relatively new to this unit, so for all I knew, he was my battalion sergeant major. I would have never have known. And it turns out he wasn't my battalion sergeant major. I don't know who he was, but it wasn't mine. And he was like, and now remember, we're far enough away from Joe where Joe cannot hear anything that we're saying, and he's not yelling at me either. He just kind of, he's just talking nice and calm, and he says, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, Sergeant Major," and I started going down my justification for my actions in terms of smoking this dude and what Joe had done and on and on and on. And Sergeant Major just kind of looks at me and goes, Yep, I totally get it. Totally understand." And he goes, it's after hours. It's past the COB. I'm like, "Yes, Sergeant Major." He goes, "I appreciate your desire to help, square this young soldier away." And I'm like, "Yes, thank you, Sergeant Major." And he says, "What's your goal here? What's your objective?"
Yeah, baby.
And I was like, "Well, I wanted him to not do that again. I wanted to teach him a lesson, hold him accountable, so he won't make said mistake again." And he says, "Okay, I get it. Yeah, totally understand." He goes, "Do you think that this guy is going to get done with all those push-ups and get up and go about his merry way and never make that mistake again because of all of those push-ups that he did?" And I'm like, And he goes, maybe not, right? I'm like, "Roger, Sergeant Major." And he goes, "So is the whole idea here teaching him a lesson, or is the whole idea here to punish him? Because there's 2 different things, right?"
Yes.
And I'm like,
and those waters get very muddy.
Yes, and you're still
for
muffled.
A lot of people. Damn it.
Yes. And so I was like, that was his question to me. Are you trying to teach him a lesson so he won't do whatever that is again? Or are you trying to punish him? And I realized at that moment that what I was doing was more punishment than it was teaching a lesson. But Sergeant Major stopped me. He goes, Don't answer. I don't want you to answer that." He goes, "But is there something else that you can do that would actually force him to learn the lesson as opposed to it just being a punishment?" And I kind of looked at it for a minute, and he goes, "Think about that there, Sergeant. And if there is something that you could do next time to actually teach the lesson as opposed to just enforce a punishment, then you should probably try to do that." And I'm like, "Roger, Sergeant Major." He goes, "All right, now, good talk." He goes, "Go back over there, and if you let him up as soon as you get back over there, then he's going to think that I told you to let him up, and you're going to lose face. So what I want you to do is I want you to go back over there, and I want you to smoke his ass for another 10 minutes and let me walk away, and then you can go about your business." I'm like, "Roger, Sergeant Major." So there you go.
Smoke his ass for
Yeah.
another 10 minutes.
So he walks away. I go back over there. Now, that Sergeant Major taught me so much in that 5-minute conversation.
See, Sergeant Majors really do know stuff.
Dude, that was such a learning lesson for me. I learned one Sergeant Major taught me a lesson. He allowed me to save face with Joe. And I was able to deal with soldiers differently going forward.
That's leadership, baby.
That is.
I had a squad leader that, I don't want to go soak this up with stories, but so I had a squad leader who was very much the same, maybe had the same conversation with the same fucking sergeant major that you did.
Yeah.
Because he was very adept he would smoke your ass, and then he would be like, all right, now get up, come with me. And he would show you or sit down and talk to you and tell you the right way to do it. He would always use it as a teachable, coachable moment.
Right.
Every time you fucked up. It didn't matter what it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So anyway, just saying.
So
those are the leaders you remember.
Yes, and it's a story that clearly delineates the difference between accountability and punishment, right?
Yes, and it's such a big point that most people just miss.
Yes. And then the other thing is, the point 2 that they're making here in the Harvard Business Review is that we have a deeply held assumption that accountability is a one-off event rather than thinking of it as a long-term personal conversation between manager and employee. Now, the best way for me to describe this, and when I'm coaching folks about this and how this works, this is the story that I use to illustrate it. Imagine you're in a car and you're driving on the straightest, flattest road possible. Now, depending on where you live in the country, you may not be able to imagine some road like that exists, especially up here in the New England area. Everything is windy, curvy, hilly. There's very little straight roads. But back when I lived in Nevada, in order to drive from my hometown of Elko, Nevada to Salt Lake City, I had to actually travel over the salt flats. And if you're unfamiliar with the salt flats are, you remember that movie Independence Day with Will Smith?
Yeah.
And he
talking about Bonneville.
Yeah, exactly, where they do like the land speed records and things like that.
Yeah, man. The Bonneville Salt Flats.
Yeah, the Salt Flats. It's where he's dragging it's where they're driving that motorhome across the Salt Flats and all that, right? So great big open area, and this road that travels, I forget what highway it is now, but the road travels, it goes, I think it's I-80, but it travels basically through Elko, Nevada, and it goes over to Salt Lake City. And there's this one section of road that's like, it's so flat and so straight and so long that literally the road disappears over the horizon. Like you can't even see where it goes. It's just that. So there you are. Picture yourself driving on that road. There's no other cars around, right? No, you're the only one that exists. And you're driving your car right square in the middle. You're straddling the white dotted line, right? You're straddling it. Now, imagine for a moment that you're at speed, 65, 70 miles an hour, whatever it is, and you got that car locked on in the middle of the road. Now, you're going straight. The road doesn't curve. The road is straight. You got that car locked on, and imagine for a moment that you hold the steering wheel perfectly straight down the center of that road. How long will you actually drive before the car starts to... Now, you're not moving the steering wheel, but you know how cars are. They just naturally drift one way or the other, right?
Oh, I mean, it could be from wind. It could be from...
Right.
Alignment being off, whatever.
Yeah,
right.
So you're holding the car as straight as you can, but and if you just lock that steering wheel in place and you didn't move it and you didn't slow down, you didn't make any kind of correction, you're eventually going to be off the road and in the ditch, right?
Right.
So, and that's what this is saying right here. Oftentimes, leaders, i.e. managers, supervisors, whatever title you may have, if you've got people that work for you, oftentimes, and this has been my experience on more than one occasion in more than one company, it's been my experience, not just personally, but with others as well that I've heard stories about, managers and or supervisors wait to address an issue until the car is upside down in a fucking ditch somewhere.
Yeah, until you're in crisis.
Right. Then it's like, wow, let's talk about this car that you bounced off the guardrail, flipped end over end.
A little late, buddy.
That you're ejected from and you're fucking bleeding and all your bones in your body are broken. Now, let's sit down and talk about, how that happened. What they're talking about here in terms of accountability is instead of it being a one-off event, that one-off event is that car flipping end over end into the ditch. Think of it rather as a long-term personal conversation between manager and employee. So that if that supervisor was instead a passenger in that car, and as I started to drift a little bit off center, that supervisor says, hey, watch the road. Oh, shit, thanks, man. And then you start drifting the other way. Hey, you're drifting a little bit. Get off your phone. You're texting. What the fuck you doing, right? And then so you make these gradual, just like you do to keep that car straight on the road all along. You make gradual adjustments, a little bit left, a little bit right, a little bit left. No matter how straight the road is, you're always making minor corrections left and right in order to stay in your lane, right? Those minor corrections, right? That's the accountability, constant conversation accountability that we're talking about here. Waiting until the shit is catastrophic and you need to call the paramedics, like that's when most managers and supervisors want to sit down and have a conversation. People, it's fucking too late. It's too late to have a meaningful conversation when it's to that point.
That's part of the thing that you and I talk about all the time is that with managers and leaders nowadays, this whole accountability thing is a lot of what needs to happen is you need to be present in your straight line people in what they're doing.
Right.
Too often you have, and I like to call them managers. You have managers that are too busy doing the work that they're responsible for, along with crunching numbers. And the people that work for them aren't even part of the equation in their minds.
Right.
So they have tunnel vision, right?
Yep.
And that's the difference between a manager and a leader.
Right.
A leader actually realizes that the biggest asset that he has is the people that work for him. And that if they succeed, he succeeds.
Right.
It's not the other way around.
Yes.
Whereas most managers look at it as if they succeed, then we all succeed. Or if I succeed, then I succeed. My team had nothing to do with it.
Yes.
They might as well be parts of a computer. So there's that accountability aspect of it, is that you as a leader or manager or supervisor or whatever fucking title you want to put to it, especially in the civilian sector, but definitely in the military sector as well, you're only as good as the people working for you. So if you take the time to actually know and, work with and make the people that work for you better, the better you're going to look. Because I can tell you that the vice president that's overseeing you, who's he going to hold accountable for everyone fucking up?
Right. Right.
I'm not trying to step on your toes with this, but I just need people to see that shit. That you're only as good as the people that work for you.
That's right.
So the nuggets of wisdom that Eddie's giving here really are that. And that sergeant major that corrected staff sergeant, were you staff sergeant or sergeant?
No, I was a sergeant then.
All right. So Mr. Sergeant Lazary knew what the fuck he was saying, and that's what he was saying, basically.
Right. Yep.
Is let's head this off before we get into crisis here. So
yeah, and continuing in this Harvard Business Review article, the author talks about the idea of the supervisor or manager being in a position of one that is, one, I care about you, and I see it as my job to let you know when you get off track.
Weird.
Right. Crazy.
Actual guidance.
Yeah, man.
Actual fucking guidance.
Yes.
And that is far and few in between, frankly, in this. I don't know. No, should I say it? In theory, it's there. The problem is the execution is piss poor shit.
That's right. Yeah. And what he says here is, why are we depriving our employees of that kind of experience? The experience of being told when you're a little bit off track instead of waiting until the ambulance needs to be called, right? So he suggests thinking of accountability as a dial with 5 steps. Now, here's where the actual tips, tricks, and coachable knowledge comes into this episode. Start off with the low end of the spectrum and then turn up the dial if necessary. So the first 3 steps are what he calls the mention, the invitation, and the conversation that most managers skip over that lead to the employee disengagement and cultural stagnation. And the last 2 steps, of course, what we call the boundary and the limit, cover the ground of probation and termination. All right. Yeah. So we're not going to get into the last 2, but I want to get into the first 3 steps, because the first 3 steps are like what you do when you're in the car with your subordinate to say, hey, man, you're off track a little bit. The last 2 steps are when the shit's in the ditch, and, not only is that employee like screwed, but you now as a supervisor and manager, you don't look good to your bosses either, because you're a subordinate. I hate to use the word subordinate. Your direct, your employee just burned in. You know what I mean?
And just wrapped in, man.
Right. So the first 3 steps cover the essential skills of naming, framing, and unpacking performance issues in a way that quickly moves from surface level events to meaningful and actionable personal growth themes. And the first one, the mention. Now, I am going to read these verbatim because I cannot summarize this any better, and these are relatively short anyway. So here we go. The first step is naming small but problematic behaviors in an informal way in real time by pulling an employee aside to put words into what you're noticing. Instead of waiting for a crisis, you start to build a relationship of mutual respect. You show that you genuinely care about their growth and acknowledging that they're overwhelmed instead of pretending that you don't see, and by helping them find their contribution to a conflict instead of letting it fester. So you are offering to be part of a solution instead of just standing there saying, like, how dare you did this, or why did you do that?
Exactly what the sergeant major did.
Exactly. It's exactly what the sergeant major did. So it's actually a really good story that I led off with to demonstrate this.
Huh.
The next one is the invitation. All right. We are great at seeing patterns in other people's behavior. It's harder to see those patterns in ourselves. We all know that's true. The invitation is taking the time to help your employee connect the dots. For example, let's say that you saw a typo in a team member's client email on Monday. They seemed disengaged in a team meeting on Wednesday, and then there was miscommunication with a teammate on Thursday. Ask them what those events might have in common, or point to a deeper theme. So it's the invitation, right?
Well, it's also the invitation it's just, I guess, a way of putting it into more layman's terms.
Yeah.
Even though that's a very good description, it's, hey, why don't you actually talk to that employee?
Right.
Like, find out what's going on.
Right.
Could it be something in their personal life that's totally affecting their professional?
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's what they're saying there.
Yeah, it's asking yourself, what else could that mean? Right?
Right, exactly. And then I'll let you go on.
Yeah, so the third point is the actual conversation. This is the place to go deeper by asking questions that guide people to the aha moment when they discover for themselves how changing this pattern at work would have positive impacts at home, which I think you've already alluded to.
Or vice versa.
Right. It might sound something like this. Quote, "We've been talking about you taking on too many projects and the impact that it's having on the quality of the most important ones, your family members. I'm not asking for you to share what you've come up with here, but one question that helps me is, where does this pattern show up in my personal life, and what would be the benefit if I stopped?" That's that self-assessment, the self-actualization. But you're helping your employee come to, like, have you ever had a conversation, like, you're struggling with something, right? And you don't know what it is, but as soon as you start talking to somebody about it, you end up, like, answering your own questions, and you come up with your own answers all on your own.
Aha, like you totally, yes.
Yeah, that's really what it is.
Right. Yeah, it's basically just, it's guidance.
Yes.
All they're talking about here is for a manager or leader to actually lead.
Yes.
At least in the way that I see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what this guy's talking about is very lacking in this day and age.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
So, this is why we're talking about it, I guess.
And why is that? Let me ask Bennett. What, in your opinion, why do you think supervisors and managers avoid this altogether? And they don't. And they wait to have any conversations to the point where, folks, when as an employee, when you're in crisis mode, when you're in the ditch, upside down, like your manager, if you are the manager, you have no choice. You have to talk to them about it. You have to elevate it. Now you've got to get HR involved. You've got to get your boss, which may be a director or vice president or an executive, involved. Like, you can't, I mean, there's certain things that happen that are little enough where you can kind of absorb that, maybe take the hit for it, whatever. But there's certain things as like, dude, I can't protect you from that shit. Like, you're done. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So I can tell you that in my opinion, the reason that is lacking in this day and age is we don't, in general, people don't know how to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. So it's broken down to it's a breakdown in basic communication, and it's also a breakdown in, frankly, society has got people scared to do anything that is overtly confrontational.
Mm-hmm. That's
so
right.
You telling an employee that they're fucked up is like, oh my God, like you can't do that.
Right.
But yet you have to. So my challenge to people, and this is what I always put forward to people, is how do you, and especially to veterans, and I say people, I mean veterans, because we're used to just being able to beat your face on the floor.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Do push-ups, shut up and listen to the words coming out of my mouth. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
But you can't do that. So you need to learn how to communicate and be tactful. We all know tact. We do it every time we talk to a commander or whatever. We all know how to do it. You just have to be able to switch it on and switch it off. Be tactful. Tell somebody they're fucked up without saying you're fucked up.
Right.
And you know what? You can never get in trouble for as long as you do it the right way. Mm-hmm. But that's also the thing, is you have to have the courage to step up and be like,
yeah, man,
you are messing this up and here's why. But don't just say you're messing up and not have that's part of this whole, the invitation and conversation. You have to be able to give them actionable tips, tricks, and coachable knowledge to fix themselves.
That's right.
You can't just roll into this and be like, you're fucked up. I don't know how you're going to unfuck it, but unfuck it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes people need to be seen that they're messing stuff up. Need to be shown that, because they might not know.
They may not know.
But you still need to be able to teach them an alternative or show them an alternative. And then they'll be like, aha. Sometimes it's just a matter of having that conversation, but you have to have the conversation. Because most people know the right answer. Yeah. They just need to have the conversation.
That's right.
And too often, again, like you said, you're upside down in the ditch before you even have the conversation.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it's a moot point.
Yeah. It's a little too late. You wake up, your day's confused. Maybe you were knocked out unconscious. You wake up and you're bleeding, broken bones. And you're like, what the fuck just happened?
What the fuck just happened? So
like, how'd that happen?
As a leader, you need to figure out a way to make your people accountable following this type of premise before they end up in the ditch.
That's right.
That it's really that simple.
Yeah. Because if they end up in the ditch, folks, now if
Who takes the heat? Because shit rolls downhill, folks.
If you do all of these things and they still end up in the ditch, it's because they worked really hard at getting themselves in the ditch.
Just
and
they're fucking trained.
Yeah, yeah. And there's nothing you could have done to help that, right? So you could take that one and be like, yep, that one's not on me. But folks, if you got people that end up in the ditch and you haven't done any of these steps, then they're fucking fucked up because of you. You own that. It's your job.
I mean, it might not end up being because of you, but
it's you need to take accountability for that happening.
Correct.
Right.
That's what this is all about.
Right. Yes. You want your people to be accountable. Well, when shit happens, and you have to be accountable as well.
You can't put the shit off on your people all the time.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. So, folks, we're wrapping this one up here. the actionable tips, tricks, coaching knowledge, the takeaway for this episode is understanding what accountability is and understanding if you're not hiring manager, if you're a manager, supervisor, whether it's dotted line or direct line, you have the obligation. The organization is paying you. Your duty, your absolute duty is to manage your people, to hold them accountable, but to do it in a way that is meaningful to their success. And the three ways are the mention, the invitation, and the conversation. And folks, I'm going to leave you with one more incredible resource. We had the opportunity a while back to interview a gentleman by the name of Mark Horstman, who is a co-founder of Manager Tools and Career Tools. And he authored a book called The Effective Manager. And the links to that will be in the show notes for this episode. It is an absolute incredible book. We alluded it to this episode about the first ingredient in any of this is to develop a relationship with your directs, right? Yep. And we didn't get into how that happens or how you can do that in this episode. But if you pick up that book, it
is a badass book.
It is, man. It breaks it down. It is probably hands down the single most actionable book I've ever read in my life, period.
That nobody's ever heard of.
Right.
Which I don't understand.
The Effective Manager. It breaks it down. If you want to be an effective... Now, this guy, Mark, he gets paid he gets paid by large organizations a lot of money. He is an executive coach. He goes into like Fortune 100 companies and goes in and coaches their executives. Like he's teaching CEOs, CIOs, CFOs, COOs, like, presidents, vice presidents, directors. Like he's teaching those types of people at huge companies like GE, Procter and Gamble. I mean, dude, this dude.
He's a veteran.
He is a veteran. Yes, West Point grad. Yep.
Which is awesome.
So folks, there you have it, man. That is this episode, and I hope if this stings. And here, the whole premise of 2017 is for Bennett and I to lay it all out there, unfiltered, unbiased. Like we're speaking truth this year. We're not tapping around or beating any bushes. We are going to give it to you straight. And there may be some episodes that you listen to. Maybe this is one of them. Maybe it isn't. But in the future, you might hear one that's going to sting a little bit. It's going to make you a little bit uncomfortable. It's going to make you want to turn the shit off because you know that it's true.
I just want everyone to take what we're saying. It's not like we're above any of this, folks.
No.
It's not like we're looking down on people. It's not like we're, we've made every fucking mistake we're talking about.
Yep.
Okay. And do daily still.
Yeah.
Maybe not daily, but we still make these mistakes because nobody's infallible.
Right.
But the difference between us and possibly you is that we admit when we don't know it, and that we have already come to that accountability point where we go, dude, I'm fucked up.
Right. Yeah.
And what we're challenging you to do is to do that as well, is to actually apply what we're talking about this year to you, not to anybody else, but to you. And if you do that, there's going to be some sticky points here where you're going to be like, those guys are bullshit. But the more you think about it, we're right. Yeah. You know it in your heart and your soul. So it might not apply to you, but we're going to find something that does. And that's our mission. So look inside yourself. That's one of the things that throughout this, we're coming up, and it's something that I know you and I have both talked about, but we have to have a kick-ass self-assessment that we put out there.
Yeah.
But easier said than done. And of course there's not a magic pill that you can take to do a self-assessment.
Right.
But that's why we're trying to do this. So this is a year of change, folks. 2017.
Yep.
Come along on this ride with us and we'll learn, you'll learn. And yeah, man, I think it'll be good. It's good for everybody.
Yep.
So just had to put that out there.
Good discussion. I love it. Folks, that will be the end of this episode. You can find more over at the show notes page. All the links that we talked about will be there at changeyourpov.com/episode 150. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. And folks, if you find this valuable, please share it with somebody in your life. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a coworker. If this doesn't apply to you, but you know it could to someone else, share it with them. If it applies to you, then chances are of it applying to somebody else is probably pretty good. Come be a part of our community over at Change Your POV Squad Facebook group and carry on the conversation. We are doing a lot of discussions over there. Some of those discussions get a little crazy, which we're completely okay with. And if you got a stupid, ridiculous video you'd like to share, like the ones that we're putting up right now, then by all means, I'm down for a good laugh. All right, folks. Until next time.